Hi, everyone. I'm Phil Boers with Healthy Places by Design. And I'm sending greetings and bringing weather from Durham, North Carolina. And I looked at my phone; it's the same thing: 48 degrees and sideways rain. Just coming together now with the group. Thank you. So I have had such a pleasure working with the foundation team, Francis and Morgan and Jillian and Shannon and everyone here. So I guess you could say we've been hanging out together for the last 3 or 4 years. They're in DC. We're mostly in North Carolina, but in different places to work on social connection together. And I feel like I'm from public health field. I feel like we're kind of in our adolescence around social connection. So it's been great to be here and see you all. We might have seen some of you 2 years ago in Cambridge. This morning, we're going to discuss how the pathways to broader systems change can start with connections, small connections, or a community process, or maybe a grant. We're going to spend most of our time, just a few slides up front, but we're going to spend most of our time discussing you with each other in groups, small groups of twos and threes, and then with our wonderful panel. And then we'll be done. And then I think lunch is next, right? So I'm so happy to be here with our wonderful friends here. So lucky to have three wonderful people that are very experienced working in communities and beyond. So BJ Woods and Jonna Johnson are here. They came from Arkansas and Michigan, and they both have led a community planning process and more and where they're from. Rick Brush comes to us from Hartford, Connecticut, and he's been involved in the Gates funded social capital project, which was just a session in this room. So glad you could all make it. Has anyone heard of the action guide for building socially connected communities? Raise it high. Okay, great. We don't have to review this, but you know that this was something launched right after the meeting in Cambridge and Boston 2 years ago. We were gearing up to that, and it's a great process. Has anyone used it in a community? You have. Excellent. Great. So you'll be able to ask good questions. I just offer it as a resource, and I have another slide next, a couple of slides about resources to help you think about and do this work. So the action guide is intended to communities walk through a planning process to prepare them for implementing solutions that are the result of all those conversations, the community engagement. Like, what can we do in our community or a particular sector to boost social connection opportunities? Again, the action guide has these 6 steps. Those who have done it are very familiar with them. Maybe you have a tattoo on it by now. But these, nothing in here is out of normal from, say, a public health or community development planning process. You start by learning more in your community and assessing and having conversations about social connection, and then ending up with a plan of action that's your blueprint for how to act and how you might evaluate. It was just, again, if you see the partners on here, Einhorn Collaborative, very generous in resourcing this, and as well as the meeting 2 years ago in Boston, and in this meeting as well. Healthy Places by Design worked on this, obviously led by the foundation, but also Harvard's Human Flourishing Lab was a part of it. So they really brought like an academic heft. Like, that was an inside thought. Sorry. I'm gonna leave the QR code up for a minute if you want to link to it. If you don't have it bookmarked, I know some of you do. But we're just, it's been something that we have worked with communities to implement. Jonna and BJ are here, having been part of that process. Einhorn also supported the foundation to do training and technical assistance and peer facilitation, so that BJ and Jonna knew each other across Michigan and Arkansas, and we had a community in West Sacramento, California, and Cowley County, Kansas. So we had quite a distribution across the country in different contexts to help us understand how the project worked. Has anyone seen something similar to this? Of course, the Action Guide people have. So, we're talking ultimately throughout the Action Guide about addressing social isolation through systems. And it's a way of thinking that is natural to many of you are working in public health, community development. Maybe you're working in mental health or healthcare systems. That you know, at the end of a project or at the end of the day, what's the imprint we have left in the community? When this funding is gone and going on to the next funding. So that's essentially the rationale for looking at systems, is to leave something behind that could be sustained. If you would like, take a picture of this. You can see the source is from FSG, and they produced a document called The Waters of Systems Change. And we all think about systems maybe in a different way. In public health, they have PSE. Does anyone remember PSE? Policy, Systems, and Environment Change. Well, policy was clear, environment is like what you see outside, and systems is like everything else. It's all the day-to-day work of institutions. Well, this is another way of looking at pulling it back, and that's actually those are all in that model. The Action Guide link is there directly to that model. What you'll see is, at the bottom of the pyramid are like mental models. I'll just go through quickly. Mental models are our habits of thought, like even maybe unconscious, but they really influence how we think, what we do, how we act, how we vote. And then moving up are power dynamics, the distribution of decision-making power and influence, both explicit and implicit, relationships and connections. And this feels natural, in this setting and the people we work with. So the quality of connections and between people, within organizations, among organizations, especially those with differing histories and viewpoints. Policies, familiar with that, though these are generally more formalized government institutions, organizations. The rules and regulations and reflected in their priorities that guide an organization's their actions and the actions of others. Practices are stated activities of the institution. They are uh, they are rules and regulations. They're the kind of the day-to-day practice and operations of an organization or a government. Resource flows is how money, people, knowledge, relationships are all connected and how that is distributed. And then, of course, infrastructure too. And then the last one at the top, when we were developing the action guide, we felt that something was missing. And it was really about the experience people have in their communities. So that if you see that top layer, it's labeled experiential. So this is, we step out the door. What do you see around you or in your neighborhood? Is there a nearby park or places where people can get together? So this is the difference, that top layer, if you looked at the FSG version. This is social and civic infrastructure. It's things like libraries and parks, um, the street the street corridor, sidewalks, public plazas, public spaces. They're all part of the built environment and can be activated as a heart of a neighborhood, or left in disrepair. So either it can go either way. So I just wanted to share briefly. We're not going to enough slides. I can't wait to uh, have you hear from our panelists. And I want to just quickly introduce our friends here. BJ is the executive director of an organization in Little Rock called Village Place. And you might have a postcard in your seat, or you might have gotten one. Yeah. And if not, just you can, there's a QR code on it and she'll order more. Oops. She works with community members and other neighborhood partners, and they developed a hub of connection called Dream Space. So she may say a word or two about that. And when I asked BJ how she likes to connect, she said she's a mama of 3 children first, and that she's still discovering ways of making new connections. Thank you. Jonna Johnson works with a Michigan group called CommunityWorks. She also works for the Saginaw Chippewa Tribal College in Mount Pleasant, Michigan. She's an instructor there. And when I heard from Jonna how she likes to connect, she said she likes to ask deep questions while standing in line or sitting next to someone. Now I want to stand in line next to you, Jonna. And Rick is with us from Hartford, Connecticut. He's the founder of Transform Together. They help communities, companies, investors, and teams collaborate across their differences. Rick was also an advisor on the Gates Foundation project, which launches today. Shout out to Francis for that, led that work. So congratulations. Rick likes to connect with people in nature. So here we are. Let's get to hear from our folks. I have a few questions for you. And BJ, if you wouldn't mind going first, and then maybe Jonna and Rick, you can just speak in. 2 questions. Tell us where you live, about your community and your work and your role in creating social connection. And then tell us what inspires you to take action.
Okay. So, thank you all for joining us today. Thank you, Phil, for creating the space for us to have this conversation. My name is Billie Woods, Billie Jean. I always tell people, think about Michael Jackson's song, You Will Not Forget My Name. I'm in Little Rock, Arkansas, in the South End community. My organization is called The Village Place. We primarily have youth programming, Our Voices. We have an amazing magazine that our children created. It was like 156 pages. We do a program called the Experiential Learning Lab, where we are providing workforce development. We do lots of youth programming, but we also have Dream Space, which is on the card that I gave to you all. Um, I'm trying to remember the question. Sorry. Um,
Tell us about where you live
okay,
and your
so
work, then what inspires you to
my community is beautiful. The people within my community are beautiful. I was born and raised in Little Rock. My mother was born and raised in Little Rock. My father was born near Little Rock, Arkansas. And when I think about my community, I think about so many wonderful things. I think about um, popsicles. I think about after school. I think about walking. I think about going to the mall is like the cool thing to do back in the day. I think about my grandmother's house. I think about so many wonderful things. I was inspired to do the work, or I've been inspired by my parents. My parents have always been heavily involved in community work, and have kind of encouraged us to not look at service as something that you add to your life, but as something that that describes the way that you live. So I think that it kind of was a natural thing for me to become so focused on community, serving community, and organizing. The second part of the question.
really what inspires you to take action? You're
Oh,
talking
so I
about that
think
right now.
did I answer it?
You're good.
Okay. Okay. So
What do you think?
okay. Thank you.
Thank you. John, same thing. Tell us about your community where you live and work and about your role in creating social connection.
Great. Thank you. Miigwech. I learned at the tribal college, miigwech means thank you. I live and work in Mount Pleasant, Michigan, which is affectionately known as the middle of the Mitt. I can point to exactly. I can point. I can point to it. Wrong hand. That's fine. One of the wonderful. So I was born and raised in Grand Rapids, Michigan. So I am a Michigander, but I am not originally from the middle of the Mitt. But I have very much appreciated getting to know that section of Michigan. One of the things that makes it unique is that it is. I'm hearing the voice in my head to tell everybody it's the gateway to up north. So if you know anything about Michigan, it's yes, it's the gateway to up north. Also, what makes it unique is that there is a town, a college town, a river town, recreation town, and also an Indian reservation right there. So the Saginaw Chippewa tribe was removed from their land and moved to the middle of Michigan. And so there's a lot of diversity, and there's a lot of love and a lot of culture, and also a lot of tension and a lot of healing and a lot of um, interaction in every way that you can imagine with different communities living in the same space.
Jonna, what inspired you to do this work?
Great. So, the big picture, or the little picture, but affects the big picture, is that my mom, the historic trauma that's in my family, led my mom to isolate all the time, no matter what. The answer to everything was to isolate. And as I was growing up, that's what I knew. But as I was leaving home, what I realized and what I learned gradually and through a lot of pain, but through a lot of joy and growth as well, is that connection was actually the answer to a lot of the concerns that I had and a lot of the yuck that I was feeling. Connection was the answer. And so I learned experientially coming out of home that connection was what was going to get me through and what was going to change everything else as well, not just my own heart and my own growth, but and my own mental health, but it's the answer to everything. I feel like community and connection's the answer to everything. So I said yesterday at the lunch table, I can't not do this work. Like, it just feels like it's the answer. And since I know it's the answer, I got to go out and do the work.
Thank you, Jonna. Rick, tell us about where you live and work and your role in creating social connection.
All right. Thanks, Phil. And thank you, BJ and Jonna. And thank all of you for being here. I'm Rick Brush, and I live near Hartford, Connecticut, just outside of it. And a lot of my work is in Hartford. And so I'm going to focus a lot on Hartford and what's great about Hartford today. I do lead an organization working with communities. So I'm privileged to actually have worked in communities all around the country and lots of different states and urban and rural, and just a whole rich set of experiences, and really getting to know people in their community and what they love about it, what they want to transform or change within those communities. And so the work that I do is really around three things. It's sort of a catalytic role where someone from the outside comes in, helps the community see how awesome they are, what they have that they might take for granted, what their strengths are, but also what their aspirations are. And in listening and deeply listening to those aspirations can really energize a community. So that's much of what the work that I've been able to do, both now and most recently as part of a 10-year nonprofit project working with 5 communities around the country called Wellville.
Inspiration.
Inspiration. So I'll go back to nature a little bit for this one. I do find being outside and being outside either alone or with people just helps me reconnect to a larger perspective. And I think purpose and meaning is so important to all of us in the work that we do, and finding ways to rekindle that. So my story briefly is that as the quote goes, in the middle of the road of my life, or in this case, my career, I found myself in a dark wood where the true way was wholly lost. Something like that, the quote goes. And for me, that was when I arrived at Cigna, a large health insurance company. I spent 20 years, I'm older than you might think, in corporate world, strategy and marketing roles. My wife and I moved from Michigan. We were just outside of Detroit. To Connecticut for this new job at Cigna. And I was really inspired because it was an opportunity to make an impact on health. And over the course of maybe the first few months that I got there, I started to get a little disheartened that much of what Cigna and the traditional healthcare system was thinking about was just that: traditional healthcare, doctors and pharmaceuticals and access to healthcare, which is really important, but is not what creates health fundamentally in the first place. So I became a little bit depressed about the move that I had made. We just had a 1-year-old child when we moved, and we were in this new community. So the short version of the story is that I am so grateful that I met 2 other colleagues at Cigna that were sort of asking these bigger questions. And the bigger questions were around what is health, and what fundamentally matters to health, and how could we, the 3 of us, turn the ship a little bit and have Cigna begin to look more broadly at these community influences of health. So we launched an initiative with Cigna's blessing and funding I didn't want to stop that, so I left Cigna and started this nonprofit. Happened to be lucky enough to find an investor who was willing to fund it, and that really turned me to look inward and do what I was doing with communities all around the country in my own community. So I'll say more about that as we move forward.
Thank you, Rick.
Yeah.
So anyone could take this question on first is, where does social connection show up most in your community? So you could be thinking about third spaces or local culture, shared spaces. Feel free to, any of you, to start off.
So I'm gonna get to the answer, but it's gonna take me a second. Okay. um, for context, when we first started the Village Place in 2018, we had an idea. We were saying we're gonna go in our community. We're gonna go to X amount of doors. We have this many minutes. I had just gotten done with my Master of Public Service degree at the Clinton School, so I was very well versed in theoretical strategies for needs assessments. Right. So we were going to go to this many doors and spend this much time at each door and get this much information. We did. When we went to the doors, though, we were not spending 5 minutes. We were listening to stories, right? So that was the first thing. We didn't we probably didn't get through a quarter of the homes that we wanted to. And I think that was kind of the first time that I realized, like, yes, we're understanding that we need to have people to tell us what to do and to tell for the community to be at the front of this work, but we're still making community the subjects of the work. So that's kind of like the very first, I would say, toe dip into like social connection work. It wasn't right, but it was what we did. So then we were able to participate in Highlander Institute's participatory action research training. And through that training, we were kind of able to get the language around how to be co-conspirators and co-creators with our community, alongside our community, as opposed to asking community what we needed to do and being us developing these solutions. And so after that, we kind of that's kind of when we were introduced around that time to the Foundation for Social Connection, Phil and Morgan, and we were able to get the infrastructure. We were able to adopt, using the action guide, we were able to build our infrastructure around how we could stay connected to people throughout our community who were concerned about various issues. Now, I know that wasn't the answer to the question, but I'm getting to it. One of the things that someone said yesterday, the lady from the Robert Woodson Foundation, she mentioned her dad going to the grocery store, knowing every grocery store clerk's name, going to the bank, going to the corner store, going to the deli. So I think social connection in our community shows up in these small interactions, like seeing people here today, Ashley, that I just met yesterday, my friends from Slutty Vegan. Yesterday, you coming out of yoga, just seeing faces and having those moments, those small moments of like engagement has made this feel so much more comfortable for me. Just those, just so I think, like, for us, social connection happens anytime we can get it to happen. In just the smallest moments, in knowing the mailman, knowing the person that delivers the pharmacy for the pharmacy, knowing the Instacart driver, having your preferred Instacart driver. So I think it shows up in various ways that don't always look like something um big, So sorry.
Gotcha.
Yes.
So if anyone, either of you others, Rick or Jonna, want to answer that question about where social connection shows up, maybe it's spaces, maybe it's in organizations.
All right, Johnny, you're gonna have to go next. Um, yeah, that was so beautiful. Thank you for that. I guess I thinking about Francis, actually, who's sitting here, Francis Kraft in the front row, and back to this idea of an outsider coming in. So now I've been working in Hartford for a while. So even I'm taking things for granted that exists there. So Francis showed up a few weeks ago. Wasn't that long ago, maybe a month ago, and she said, "Oh, I want to see sort of what with the third places, I want to meet the people who are doing the real work. And that really caused me to think and reflect on not just sort of the usual suspects, but to dig a little bit deeper about who is really embedded in the community and who has been there for a long, long time, doing the work. And so it was just an amazingly fun week. It was a full week. We went to 12 or 13 places, 13 places. Ended up talking to, more than 100 people. Um, and we visited places like Keeney Park. Keeney Park is this gem in north end of Hartford that brings together people across all different demographics in the community. So again, back to the place where, I find connection. Turns out I'm not alone. The park is a place of connection. We went to the library, and of course, Hartford Public Library is an amazing place. Much more. It's books and more, as we heard in our last session here. Went to Samia Cafe and Real Artways, and they have this creative cocktail hour where people who don't feel like they belong in the community because they may have come from other places and they're artists, they find each other and they connect. So I'm just so appreciative of that week in one sense, because it helped me really appreciate these amazing third places that exist in the community and promote connection. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Um, yes, and so yes, there are third spaces in Mount Pleasant, and there are as well, whereas open mic and game nights and stuff like that are happening.
Thank you. Believe it or not, we're talking about systems change, right? So if we back up to our model, BJ talked about not just going in, assessing. This is a very public health comfortable space, is going in, assessing, thank you very much, taking the information, putting it into our program so we know that we're right on target. But she's talking about something different, which is actually sharing power. So you have young people and community members whose day job is not whatever our work is, who are coming in and are helping make decisions. There's this virtuous cycle of being able, the more they're involved, they can be part of the organization or go into leadership roles or be part of the planning board. So, let's not forget that that's not just an altruistic good thing to do. It's what communities need to build their capacity and thrive and to make sure what we're doing is on target. So I just wanted to call that out. And John and Rick were talking about that top layer, the built environment and social infrastructure is there. So while we're on a systems change, if either of or all of you can comment on if there's a system change that you're working for, that you're moving down. And thank you, BJ, for telling me in an earlier conversation, well, maybe the systems we have aren't working. Maybe there are new systems. I don't want to steal your answer, but and that made me really think about, there's a status quo. The systems we have are the status quo, and so maybe we need something different. So any one of you could take it on. Is there a systems change that you're focused on?
I could give you two examples of the way and talk a little bit about the way the dream space works and a couple of the things that have happened over the last year. So Dream Space, one of the special things about Dream Space is that it democratizes leadership. Anybody can be a leader. Anybody can say, if that's something you want to do and you have the capacity and the time, you can be the leader of a working group. We have 5 working groups. I'm probably going to forget one, but education, business development, wellness, um, and there are 2 more that I can't remember. Anyhow, we have 5 working groups. And people who are interested and want to be leaders of the working groups can do that. And the working groups each create, they talk about challenges that we have in our community and then co-create solutions. So one of our working groups, which is criminal justice, I think that's the one I forgot to say, is led by an organization called Little Rock Freedom Fund. Well, I don't know how many of you all are familiar with ShotSpotter. ShotSpotter is a technology that is used in cities and it picks up sound waves. ShotSpotter doesn't know if the sound wave is a firecracker, if it's a gun, if it's a car, it doesn't know, but it picks up those sound waves and then it dispatches police and police come to the area. Well, Little Rock Freedom Fund, which is one of the groups that leads the criminal justice working group has done a significant amount of work to bring awareness to ShotSpotter and how terrible, just to be honest, just how terrible it is for our community. And so that is one example of, I could go into more detail about all of the things that they have done to bring awareness, but that has been 2024. That was what they focused on primarily in 2024. We also have in Arkansas something called the LEARNS Act, which was passed by or brought into our the I'm not gonna get the legal the terms right, but anyway, we have the LEARNS Act, which tells us how our students have to receive education. One of the things in the LEARNS Act says that when our students get to the third grade, if they are not reading at a certain proficiency level, they have to automatically be retained in the third grade unless they're participating in a rigorous literacy program or they have a English language learners um, waiver or something like that. So the education group has been working on literacy lessons for third graders. They have been actively going to spaces where children are so that it's not an extra burden for parents to have to bring them or figure out what. So at the boys club, after school programs, literacy lessons are happening to get students ready for this test. These are I recognize that these are not necessarily systems changes, but they are bringing awareness to some of the things that we need to be focused on. So, and I think that's one of the most important parts, or one of the most important catalysts for systems change is bringing awareness. So, that's two examples that I could think of that have happened through Dream Space.
Rick or Jonna.
Okay, so this is an audience where you'll get this right away. Relationships are everything, right? We hear that all the time in our work. And it's even more than that. We are relationships. Everything we are is a manifestation of the relationships in our life. And I think John A. Powell talked about that yesterday. Human beings don't exist without relationship. And everything we create is through relationship. So in thinking about systems change, the only way to really change system is to change the quality of the interactions or the relationships within those systems. So I have been just blown away by the stories, including your stories, about how that happens. And I'll just share a short version of a story about how that happened in one instance in Hartford. Um, so, uh, so when I talk about the quality of relationships, I'm talking about, we have transactional relationships, like, I need to find someone to get something or get them to do it, and those relationships are pretty closed, they're pretty much focused on getting something done. They might be around efficiency or, some information exchange. And then of course there's open generative relationships where the kind of co-creation that BJ talked about happen. And I think how we show up and how we form those relationships ultimately translates to changing the system. So in the north end of Hartford, and you heard about some of the beautiful aspects of the north end of Hartford, which includes the parks and the culture and the people and the resilience and the amazing work that's happening. Others see the north end of Hartford as a place of deficits, highest crime rates, lowest high school graduation rates, highest rates of illness. And it's typically based on those deficits that a city like Hartford gets grants and funding to make improvements. And so that happened in this case. And in the north end of Hartford received a $30 million Department of Education Promised Neighborhoods grant for a 5-year period, which we're in the middle of right now. And, it was really based on what's wrong with Hartford and what needs to change. And so the grant was awarded to Connecticut Children's Medical Center, which is a big, anchor institution in Hartford. And when this grant was first announced, as you could imagine, residents of Hartford were skeptical. I would say even more so. They advocated to basically take possession of the money that was given to Connecticut Children's. Because, here it is again that this large somewhat outside institution receives the grant. They're going to do the work, and there might not be change, and certainly the residents of North Hartford wouldn't be involved. And that's not what happened. So there was this confrontation at a now infamous public meeting where residents organized and, asked for the money. And after sort of getting over that, kind of disruption of the process, everyone got back together again. So the institutions didn't run away and say, well, we're not going to do it in Hartford. And the residents didn't run away and say, you can't do it. So they found a way to get to sit at the same table together. And I think, again, it's about how we show up. And that led to deep listening agreements between the institutions and the community members about how the grant would be done, a shared governance process so that every single decision made goes through a board of community members and community organizations. The budget was made transparent so everyone knows who's getting funded. Rather than coming in with outside interventions, the funding is actually going to nonprofits in the community who have been there for decades, underfunded. But now the benefit is that it's a connected system. And the focus is on creating this prenatal to career system of support so that every child and family in the north end of Hartford gets free of charge what they need to thrive. So I bring it up as an example of systems change, but it's really at its core about, in this case, two groups, sometimes as opposing forces coming together and creating something that they couldn't have done without each other.
Yeah, that's a really good point that you brought up. So we think of this systems change graphic as like if this is the transportation system or the education system, and we're hoping that those systems can be more mindful about and intentional about social connection while they're doing their missions. Can they also be integrating better practices, policies, and all that for those community outcomes or the outcomes of those patients or people who were out in the environment, coming to a park or an open space. But Rick's point is it's not only like a guiding view for how these institutions can change support social connection, it's an ingredient to even get there. And that's what he's talking about, that piece about relationships and connections. Jonna, did you have anything else you want to say about systems?
Yeah, thank you. The work that I've been doing, I see it as the initial steps to changing who is at the table to make decisions, and the ways in which that has happened so far with my work is basically building those initial relationships to build that trust and build comfort in working together and being in space together. Also, in recognizing leadership skills, various skill sets, naming them for people, seeing what assets and what skills and what gems we have inside us or inside our community, and putting people in places where that skill gets to be utilized and shine, and we can build that confidence and be able to name it for ourselves, and then step into a role that beyond the work that I'm doing, watching people step into roles where they are saying, I'm a good listener, or I'm a great singer, or whatever it is. So open mic was a perfect example of it was not only a collaborative effort between institutions, but we very intentionally made sure that the people who were making the decisions about how open mic was going to be run and led and moved forward was everybody at the table, everybody, to the extent that we could, everybody at the table, everybody making those decisions, and us very intentionally naming the skills and naming the process so that it was owned. It could be owned by the people and the group and the institutions and the universe moving forward.
And to result in different power dynamics too and relationships. So thank you, all three of you. Let's get your voice in here. We have time for a couple questions or comments from you, and then we'll get into small groups. Who would like to ask or comment on anything you've heard this morning so far? Yeah, if you could speak up, that would be great.
Hi, can you guys speak to, well, I guess Rick first, the resources that you're providing through Transform Together, and then I guess as a whole, the systems and limitations in the work you're doing, whether I feel like funding is like the obvious one, but like in my community, it's the permitting process and things like that. So if you guys could speak to that.
I will, and I'll talk specifically about this Wellville project because that was this 10-year project working with 5 communities, and Hartford was one of those communities. So that project was funded by an angel investor, Esther Dyson. She founded and funded Wellville really with the recognition that change happens from within. So, rather than a top-down approach, here's what we want you to do. We're going to give you a grant. You can implement it. It was really reversed. It was around providing a person, we call them advisors, to each of the 5 communities who was available, full-time available person to help people on the ground who are doing the work. And again, it was more like a catalytic role. So it was somebody's coming in from the outside. First we got to earn some trust. It was a 10-year project, so the relationships got pretty deep with these advisors that were working with the community. But really, it was around those really foundational elements of bringing people together so that they're outside of their silos and they're, working at the same table. Accessing, what is it we really care about our community and what are some of the ways, some small steps that we can take to move toward progress. Ultimately, fast forwarding a little bit in the 10 years, that turned out to be maybe a more valuable resource to the community because I think what it did was, d- prove to the community, or the communities proved to themselves that they had the capacity. They already had what they needed to be successful, including the ability to raise funding. So although we didn't provide direct financial support to the community, that kind of like um, um, experience of seeing their own success attracted funding to the extent that one of our communities, Spartanburg, South Carolina, attracted $100 million of investment into the community based on, this repeated pattern of small wins and kind of growing their aspiration and their investability over time.
Thank you for that question. Either of you, if you wanted to add anything on to that before we go to discussion groups.
I just have a thing. I think that is the hamster wheel for me. Like, I think one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot is how can we make things more accessible especially for our young people? We have had to be really strategic about creating space. We're saying like, okay, we have this space. Y'all come to this space, come be a part of this space. They can't come to the space. They can't get there. They don't have food. They don't, there are many things. They don't have transportation. They don't have adults that could get them where they need to go sometimes. So how can we bring our services or bring the things that we're offering to our students and to our families? But then, there's our capacity is what it is, So that is a great question. um I was gonna say something else about something, but I don't remember. Yeah, that is a good question. I think though, like I am blown away, extremely blown away by what we have been able to accomplish as a collective. What both of you all said about like our community is full of people with various talents, abilities, skills, and when we're able to harness those together, it is mind blowing, honestly, what we can do. So yeah, I don't know. I probably didn't answer you, but I'm just my 2 cents.
I just wanted to say that the limit, besides the funding that you mentioned, the limitations that I have found is the hamster wheel, is the status quo, is the understanding this is the way things have been done, and it's very uncomfortable to step out of that. And I have found that very slow, intentional reminder. There's something else. There's something else. There's another way. Let's infuse the imagination into the conversation and see what else is there, even if it's not doable, pragmatic, even if it isn't real, it's still a seed for thinking and feeling differently than what we're used to.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Ramona Houston, originally from Texas, but live here in Atlanta, Georgia. And we had a conversation about the what do community leaders need to do most in this moment is we need to learn how to work together and more importantly, how to listen to each other. And one of the things that is going on in our country, which we are not having this conversation here, is about how leadership at the top affects the whole culture. And we are living in a moment where it's not good to talk to the person who does not believe in the same things that you believe, where you're not supposed to even have lunch with them, where you're supposed to be separate. And so we think that that has trickled down to relationships on a local level and really has affected the culture of our society.
Yeah, we just wanted to stand up, all three of us together, because we just had this sudden feeling like there's an elephant in the room we're not talking about, which is politics, and it affects us. It affects our societal culture, and it's gone even further into individualism, transactionalism, division, polarization, hate, and it makes this work that we do so much harder. So that's how you get to it.
Oh, I guess, yeah, to add to that, I'm just reflecting on something that a family friend recently said, where her sister had gone to a No Kinks protest and felt like it was kind of like a quiet thing for her to show up to. And then when she was there, she's like, oh, here are all of my friends and neighbors, and we weren't talking about it. And so that sort of experience of coming together, whatever it might be, it could be just going to the park on a weekend, but seeing these people that you relate to and have commonalities with can be such a powerful experience. And I think the more that we continue to use our voices and show up, we'll see that we're not alone in this. So that's what I got.
Way to go. Thank you, trio. Anyone else? Yeah.
Yes, I need to stand. We were talking, and I think it was triggered by something. I can't remember who asked the question here. That you said where this might be controversial, but we just need to be more comfortable breaking some rules when it comes to especially the bureaucracy. So an example that I was sharing with her is in our neighborhood, we wanted to plan a community yard sale, and we're here in Atlanta. But to do something like that, you have to apply to the city. You have to get a permit. To get that permit, you have to come up with the site plan. You have to come up with a traffic pattern plan. You have to pay for the police department to do their job to just be there. Who can do that? Who can accomplish that in after their day job, after childcare, after family care? Who can accomplish that? We just need to be comfortable just doing it and asking for forgiveness later. So we actually did do that in our neighborhood, and we just planned a yard sale. We did it on the street. We did it on one street. Nothing happened. And we raised $5,000 for a local mutual aid group. And it accomplished this. You give folks this little win, and then you can get them to come back for another one. And then you can go for the bigger wins as you go down the line. But you got to start small and build up to it. But if we make even the small things so inaccessible and so difficult, then no one's going to come back.
Well done. So asking permission optional. Well, last one.
Hi. Actually, we never got to the last question, but I'm going to summarize what we talked about, which actually goes to the last question. The lady to my left, Deborah, I'm sorry. Deborah comes from DC. I come from Chicago, and Shane comes from Oklahoma City. His community came together as a result of the Oklahoma bombing, and he does urban planning. And in looking at that, how an event such as the Oklahoma bombing led to creativity and people working together and trying to work for the good. Both Deborah and I are in cities that are under siege by the federal government. And as a result of that, our communities have been quieter in a certain way, been organizing more subversively, if you will. And looking at then the impact of what happens when there is, quote, federal action and how it leads to one outcome, which was outrage in community, another outcome, which is leading also to community, but and outrage, but with this uncertain future because it is being fueled by the federal government. So something occurring to the federal government and then the federal government acting on us. I wanted to add that.
Thank you so much. So we're about to move to lunch. Maybe I didn't need to say that, but it's coming next. And here's our last. This is what's coming up next is community lunch in the ballroom, and then we'll start right up again with these sessions, 1:45 and then 3:15, and then remember 4:40 is a plenary. But for the last few minutes, our panelists, what is one seed of connection that you're planting for the future? We talked about seeds of connection, seeds to systems.
Okay, well, first, I do want to plug the report that Francis Kraft and the Foundation for Social Connection worked on with these 6 communities, including Hartford. I assume there'll be a link or it'll be sent to all the participants because it's got a lot of really rich examples across these places. The seed I'm planting is back to North Hartford. The initiative that I talked about is called the North Hartford Ascend, this $30 million funded Department of Education grant program. And thinking about moving from seeds to systems, which I think they've kind of are on that journey, and then ultimately to sustainability. So the community is really concerned, as you might imagine, that that funding goes away, the whole thing will fall apart. So we're in the midst of a real conversation right now, residents and community members, institutions and partners and local funders about the unwillingness to let this disappear. So it's not only about the funding and the policy supports that are required to sustain it, but really about the relationships. And so there's a willingness by everyone locally to continue to build on those relationships. They're not perfect. They're still messy. There's still a need for building trust. But one thing that they're locking arms on is that this does not go away and that they will be, the relationships will be the sustainability of this North Hartford Ascend.
Thanks. A seed for me, through the action guide, I've got to meet a number of wonderful people working in Mount Pleasant. They are people who are already engaged or naturally engaged or used to being engaged. And yet I've got to witness the ripple effect from that. And one example is one of the very engaged women I've been working with encouraged her not so engaged husband to come to game night. And she said that she could hear him laughing, like they were sitting at different tables and she could hear him laughing while they were playing games. And so she came away from that having a bigger heart and excited, or a fuller heart and excited for her husband. And he has since been more engaged. And her child went to our open mic night program and her child is trans, and she had asked if she would be comfortable in that space. And mom said, our goal is to be authentic. And so if there is a space where you can feel comfortable, this should be it. And she came away from open mic saying it was really wonderful to be in a space where she generally doesn't feel comfortable in community, but to be able to have a space where she not only felt comfortable, but felt seen and connected with other people. And so I've got chills just thinking about it. So the ripple effect of that seed of connection has been powerful for us.
I think we would like to expand our network to include people that we are not as comfortable with, are not as familiar with. And so I think to start that, we would like to start to have more conversations about that and what that looks like, and just start the conversations. That would be my, I don't know, seed to system situation.
Absolutely. Can we thank our panel? Well,